Now, before we actually do the Disney cruises, let's actually talk about the one film announcement from the parks panel, which was season 2 for the Imagineering story coming in 2028. I'm really excited about this. Season 1 was just such an incredibly well-made show. Leslie Iwerks did a phenomenal job. She also has this film, World Builders, coming out pretty soon, I think like this week. So go check it out. I'll be checking it out. But season 2 of the Imagineering story sounds great. Now, the Disney cruise is something that I've never experienced. I've never been on a cruise in my life, let alone a Disney cruise. We got an announcement of the Disney Believe having Moana, Woody, Buzz, and Tinkerbell on board the boat, being a part of the ship itself, which is cool, you know? We also got a teaser for a new fleet coming to the Disney cruises in 2029. This is said to be the in-between fleet, priced presumably higher than the classic, but less than the Wish ships. So that's cool. I'm not really knowledgeable on the Disney cruises, so I started off here, and if you guys comments on it, concerns, questions, if you guys want to correct me on some stuff or point me in a great place to educate myself on these things, that'd be great. I'll probably go look up some videos about them, but I just never, grew up with these. I never experienced them. I never really looked into these, unlike me looking into the international parks. This is a big blind spot for me. It's not that I don't like these, it's just I don't really care because I don't have like a huge attachment. But hey, it seems like these were pretty good announcements for people. Disney cruise announcements always go big at D23 because I mean it's a massive money maker for Disney, and I'm sure they're a blast. Maybe someday I'll experience them. But let's go to the international parks. Now, looking at all the international parks, we actually got some real good announcements. The first announcement outside of the parks in the US was for the original Space Mountain at Disneyland Paris. This announcement caught me by major surprise because, for one, the attraction has been defunct since 2003, and for another, I listened to the For Your Amusement podcast, and they predicted this one to happen, and I really didn't think it was going to happen. I don't even think they were like 100% confident. I think they just kind of threw it out there and were like, oh, there's some rumors, we'd love to see this. And wow, their D23 prediction came true, which was really, really cool. In 2005, the ride did reopen at Paris as Space Mountain Mission 2, and then eventually Space Mountain became Hyperspace Mountain in Disneyland Paris, which isn't really anybody's favorite ride. Space Mountain in Paris has a different ride system and layout that lends itself to a more original and distinct ride. Seeing it return to its original iteration is really, really cool to me. Now, right after this announcement, we got the great news of Space Mountain Earthrise. Earthrise is a brand new iteration of Space Mountain in Tokyo Disneyland, and the ride looks phenomenal and very interesting. The exterior looks really just unique and incredible, and the focus on Earth for a ride set in space is intriguing. It's focusing on the future of space travel and stuff, as well as, Earth. And it's said to be like a somewhat emotional ride. I'm wondering what they're really doing here, and this just has a lot of potential to just be an instant classic and just another incredible ride. I love space. I love Space Mountain. So getting another iteration is just great to me. Now, after the Space Mountain announcements, we did get Marvel announcements for the international parks, starting off with the Avengers Pavilion being upgraded at Hong Kong Disneyland. There seems to be a focus on Stark Industry here, which is pretty cool. I don't know too much about Hong Kong Disneyland overall. It's one of my blind spots too, but hey, more Stark stuff. I believe this is the park with Iron Man stuff. I'm just kind of saying that off the dome. I might be completely wrong that there's the Iron Man Star Tours sort of ride. I could be wrong, but I believe that's where this is. That's why it's Stark Industries. But moving on from Marvel overseas, we have Shanghai Disneyland getting a whole entire Spider-Man land. The whole land is dedicated to Spider-Man with a roller coaster featuring Spidey and the Spidey bots. If I remember correctly, we are getting a sort of Tower of Terror dropper with Spider-Man that was announced last year and for some reason not talked about at all, either here or at one of the Tokyo parks, but I think it was in Shanghai. It would make more sense for Shanghai, especially with a whole Spider-Man centric land. Now, the final two announcements for the international parks took place at both Paris and Tokyo. Disney Adventure World at Disneyland's Paris will feature the first ever Lion King ride. This ride is a log flume ride similar to Tiana's Bayou Adventure at Disneyland and the Magic Kingdom. The ride is thankfully based off the original Lion King, the animated film, not the live action one. Now, this ride looks really cool, really fun, just, a good retelling of the original film. Hopefully someday I will make it out to Paris in general and also to Disneyland Paris and ride this ride. The final announcement overseas is one that kind of took me by total surprise. We got news of Sugar Rush Sweet Rescue at Tokyo Disneyland. This will be located in Tomorrowland and seems to be a ride that will benefit the massive e-ticket attraction of Space Mountain Earthrise. The ride is a shooter ride, much like Astro Blasters, but apparently has some really solid animatronics. Now let's look at our parks here in the States, starting at the very beginning with the Carousel of Progress. The Carousel of Progress is something that was at the forefront of the panel. The whole theme seemed to revolve around animatronics, the Carousel of Progress, and a better tomorrow, which that last part we'll get into much later on. Now, the big updates for Carousel Progress is that we got to see a bit of the already described show scene set in the 1980s on Halloween night. And we also got the voice actors announced for the attraction, being Jamie Lee Curtis as Mother, and the father will be voiced by Bryan Cranston. I personally think that these choices work extremely well. The attraction is set to open late spring 2027, which is nice that we got a release date for this one. Now, moving right along, we go to Disneyland, and we get two brief announcements for both Remember Dreams Come True and the original World of Color returning in 2027. Both of these are huge fan favorites, so it's great to see them coming back. After this, we will move over to Epcot, and we get an announcement that I am a bit concerned about. That is, Spaceship Earth will be getting an update, which is a great idea. However, my concern comes from the fact that way back in 2019, we got this exact announcement. Now, some of it was a little bit different in like detailing and everything, but that announcement never came to be with a lot of the other Epcot announcements we got at that D23, such as the Play Pavilion and Mary Poppins attraction. So I hope that the new Spaceship Earth actually does happen. It'd be great. The story is set to focus on human connection instead of human communication, and I think this ride has definitely needed an update for many, many years. I was really sad when they just kind of totally abandoned the last one, although the last one, if I'm remembering correctly, was a little bit of a stranger concept. I would have to go back and review it. You guys can let me know if it was that bad. Also, you guys can let me know, I'm now kind of second guessing if it was a D23 that this stuff was all announced at, or was it the investors thing during COVID? But anyway, it was announced in 2019-2020 era with all this other stuff and just never came to be, but hey, maybe they'll actually commit to it. Now, going over to the Animal Kingdom, we did get the announcement that took me by a lot of surprise that the Yeti from Expedition Everest would be reworked and fixed. Now, the big question then becomes, how does this actually happen? We had heard for years and years that this would be a very almost impossible, a very hard task, almost impossible task to fix the Yeti, because it seems like it would have to, be like a whole reconstruction of the entire attraction because of how the Yeti is designed. And if you're unaware, the Yeti ended up like cracking some of the steel framing due to the mechanics and heavy movement that the Yeti was supposed to have. The effects of the Yeti were extremely short-lived and died out pretty fast and caused a lot of issues for the ride, structurally speaking. So I'm wondering how they're actually going to get in there and fix this guy and make it work. But hey, if they can make it work, that would be amazing. Now, heading back to Disneyland, we did get updates for Avengers Campus over at California Adventure. Both Avengers Infinity Defense and Stark Flight Labs will open in 2028, which is actually great. We did get that release date, and seeing it so soon, it's only 2 years away, like that's really good news. We also did get the news that Jeremy Renner, Chris Hemsworth, Robert Downey Jr., Anthony Mackie, and Brie Larson will reprise their roles for both attractions, and with Robert Downey Jr., he will be coming back as Iron Man. We did get a look at Infinity Defense, and we can see that there are some cool practical sets being built, some very massive practical sets being built. But we all know that this ride is going to have a heavy amount of screens. It's kind of reminding me of, your typical Universal ride, kind of like Transformers, or maybe even like the Spider-Man ride, where there's like a lot of practical stuff, but also there's a lot of screen elements. I hope that this ride is pulled off in an incredible way. Like it kind of has to hit now as like one of the best e-ticket attractions, just because of how long this thing has been teased out, how many delays it's gone through, how many like sort of changes it has gone through. But we'll see if this is a great ride. And also Stark Flight Labs seems like interesting. I've heard it's like a sort of Kuka arm system, so that's really cool. It's a smaller ride, sitting there, but hey, another ride to fill the land is great, because that land will then have 3 attractions, and the more there, the better, especially with Avengers Campus, because if we're all being honest, it does look a little bit bleak most of the time. Now, moving on to one of my most anticipated announcements, or really just updates, is the Tropical Americas at Disney's Animal Kingdom. We got a lot of details on Indiana Jones and the Myth of the Jade Serpent. That was the title that we were given, and the ride, of course, was announced at the last D23, but now we actually do have more details, such as the title, the fact that Harrison Ford himself is a part of this ride, allowing Disney to model the animatronic after him and use his voice, which is a big thing if you didn't know. In all the other iterations of Indiana Jones, like Forbidden Journey, you don't actually have Harrison there. It's somebody else. I can't actually remember off the top of my head who they modeled the Indiana Jones model after and what voice they use, but it's not Harrison Ford. So having Harrison Ford on board is pretty cool. I'm guessing they paid him a large sum of money, and hey, hopefully he's satisfied with the ride, because that would be a pretty great signal to all of us. The ride itself does look intriguing. It seems interesting. I've already been excited about the ride, but now getting the story details, I'm even more excited, because Indy will be visiting this Mayan temple, discover the underworld. This massive serpent known as Tuscan, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Tuscan, guards the underworld. So we're going to go to the underworld, which is very interesting mythological stuff that Indiana Jones kind of rarely gets into, or I guess not rarely, but at least in this sort of way, I don't think we've really gotten to see this extreme supernatural where we're actually going to like mythological realms. Like the closest I guess we got was Dial of Destiny with time travel, and of course the iconic Raiders of the Lost Ark is built on Abrahamic religions like Christianity, but you don't actually go to like a mythological realm. It's just like opening the ark and all of that ensues. So I think this is a really cool concept. I hope that the ride system is different than the Indiana Jones in Disneyland, just because it would be nice to have that variety. From a lot of the things I'm hearing, it seems like it's going to have basically the same track layout as Dinosaur. It doesn't really seem like they're changing that a whole lot. It feels like they're going to use a lot of the elements of Dinosaur just with Indy, which I'm fine with. I think that's great. I don't really care if we're reusing the Dinosaur track and those show elements. It can work pretty well, but I am a little bit like, hey, I hope it's not too similar to the other one, because it's always nice to have variety on each coast for the different parks. Now, the other ride is the Encanto ride, titled Antonio's Fiesta de Encanto, which was shown a bit more here, and it seems to be a family ride. Some people are saying this could be a trackless dark ride. It's highly plausible that this is the case, which could be cool. I have my opinions on trackless dark rides and trackless systems. We're not going to really get into them here, but I'll probably make a video sometime soon-ish talking about the different ride systems and the pros and cons, but trackless could work here. Now, it is said that this will have a wide variety of animals. I'm really hoping a lot of these are animatronics. I know that there was like a capybara on the grounds in the pavilion that you could see, but having more animatronic animals would be incredible, because it's one thing if we have screens, which I'm sure this is going to use quite a bit of screens, but if it was something like Tiana's Bayou Adventure, or really like Splash Mountain, or it's like a million different animals thrown in there, that would just be great. We've also heard that the scale of this ride is supposed to be quite massive. I believe we like start in the rainforest. I haven't seen Encanto in a while, so I might need to watch it to refresh my memory, but I remember like each of the rooms is like almost like a magical portal in a weird way to like a whole new world that like kind of revolves around the character. And I do believe that Antonio did have the whole like rainforest thing. I know he could like talk to the animals and understand. So I think this could be a very fun ride. I think it's great that we're getting this and Indy in the same land, two massive e-tickets. And of course, it's worth mentioning that we do have that carousel coming through and the models look great. I'm not really like a huge carousel guy, but if I was at Animal Kingdom, I would definitely get on this carousel when it opens because it just looks really well crafted and just so fun. And of course, carousels are great for kinetic energy in the park. So I think Tropical Americas will probably become one of my absolute favorite lands if they can execute it properly. Now, heading back to Disney's California Adventure, we actually got a sort of look at the new Coco boat ride that was announced at the last D23. I am still quite excited about this one, but the update wasn't huge. The update was almost just small or very minimal. The ride was announced last time, like most of these rides and attractions or lands, but this time around, all we really got is that it will be set 1 year after the film, sort of before the next film. So it's like a middle piece. We will be crossing over to the Land of the Dead, just like in the film. And the queue seems to have like Hector's music and it be like a little museum of that. So that's really fun. We didn't get a release date, not really any details here, just a very, very brief update, but at least they are still prioritizing this ride. Now, moving back to Disney World's Magic Kingdom, we got arguably the best update and announcement of the night, which was more details on Piston Peak, the brand new Cars land that is taking over the rivers of America. At the last D23 when this was announced, a lot of people seemed excited until a few days later when they had realized that it would take over the rivers of America, much like how we learned days later that Muppet Vision 3D and Muppet Courtyard would be ripped away from us for Monstropolis. This land for Cars Land, Piston Peak, has been quite a big mystery for me and many others just because of the placement of the land as well as the material itself. You know, cars are quite loud and this is at a very odd central place in the park, and it's hard to envision the land from the Cars films and what we've seen in the parks implemented in this terrain and actually work well. I'm happy to say that I am quite excited about this. The updates that they gave us this time around and the little model that has been circulating online, like the little videos and photos of that, have got me very confident that Disney actually knows what they're doing. Now, I still do find it a bit weird that we're doing Cars Land, but hey, this thing is looking to be an incredible land. For starters, this is of course not the same as the Radiator Springs at Disneyland's Cars Land. Of course it wouldn't be, it's Piston Peak. This really feels like national parks. It seems to be heavily modeled after the national parks, based on the national park environment. I think that the world building they're doing here is great. We already know that Disney can really pull off the national parks in an incredibly themed way. One of my absolute favorite places in all the parks is Condor Flats with Soarin' and Grizzly River Run and, you know, like the Redwood Trails at Disney's California Adventure. It is just such a marvelously done environment, and this seems to be blending a lot of the different elements of the national parks throughout, you know, America into one actually cohesive ride and land. And the ride itself, Ridge Runners, is something that we'll get into in a little bit here, but it's interconnected. It's like all across the land. It's a big track and it's going through all the different terrains and making the land feel very tied together, which is great. Now, the first attraction that they did tell us about was this one called Miss Fritter's Daredevil Spin-Along, which is just like Mater's Junkyard Jamboree, which is great. The concept of that type of ride fits very, very well with this part of, you know, Cars 3. I think that, you know, the whole Miss Fritter thing is very memorable in Cars 3. It's one of the most memorable parts of Cars 3. So I think that this ride system, a massive Miss Fritter, animatronic bus is just great. I think it'll be a fun little addition. I like Mater's Junkyard Jamboree. It's an enjoyable ride, so this will probably be as enjoyable, if not more so enjoyable, just because of the massive animatronic in the middle. And of course, the big e-ticket attraction is looking incredible. Like I just talked about, Ridge Run Rally. It has so many different environments, like I guess biomes, you could say, like different sorts of terrains that are being implemented here. We have heard a lot that a lot of the appeal of the ride is you're going to be able to feel those terrains when you're on them. You know, the Radiator Springs Racers is a very smooth ride. Same with Test Track. They're very smooth. This is going to have you really feel the terrain. And I think that is a very wise move. And I think it's going to make for an extremely thrilling and exciting ride, especially at, you know, for Disney level of thrills. I don't know if it's going to be the most pleasant to ride on. I'm sure they'll still make it, you know, pleasant enough and not like some evil Six Flags Magic Mountain contraption, or really any Six Flags park contraption where you're sitting there and you think you're going to break your neck. I think this is going to be like an enjoyable but kind of rough ride, and I'm here for that. Now, one thing I don't think I've seen anybody point out is that this ride in particular and the entire land itself does remind me a lot of Nature's Wonderland. I don't know if the Imagineers drew any sort of inspiration from Nature's Wonderland, but to me this looks very Nature's Wonderland-esque in a weird way. It's like almost a spiritual successor, but with more thrill. If you guys don't know, Nature's Wonderland is one of these like very classic Disney attractions that didn't last for a super long time and had a lot of little, you know, types of terrain. I don't think it had snow or anything like that, but it was just like a very peaceful sort of ride, and you went through some terrains that seem like they're being fit here with the Ridge Run Rally and the entire Piston Peak area. I think the whole land's going to be great. It seems like a spiritual successor of Nature's Wonderland, which is awesome. And, you know, Disney, like I already said, can do national parks pretty dang well. So it seems like it's going to be just a great time, and they're actually improving this land far more than any of us ever thought they would. They didn't give us a release date, but if I had to say, I would guess late 2028 or maybe summer 2028. I don't know. If it's in 2029, then that's going to kind of suck, because why announce these things so far ahead of time? But we'll see when it opens. Now, moving on over to Disney's Hollywood Studios, we did get updates on Monstropolis. We got the reveal that Harryhausen's will be a restaurant with an animatronic of Harry making sushi. Pretty interesting and darkly comedic. There will also be a pizza restaurant and a theater show in the Glob Theater where Mike and Sully introduce us to the land. And it actually seems, based off of this concept art, that Mike and Sully's college friends from Monsters University will be here, which I think is a very fun callback and just an enjoyable way to bring these guys back. So that's kind of nice. There will also be an alumni center for Monsters University, which seems to be like a sort of museum, and also just, you know, offer a bunch of Monsters University merch. We all know that Monsters University sold insane amounts of merch, whether you loved the movie or didn't like it. It was a very successful thing for Disney, so I'm not surprised that they're incorporating it in an interesting enough way here. I am actually kind of happy to see their college buddies coming back. I hope that they go through with that and that doesn't just stay in the concept art, because those guys are a pretty enjoyable part of that film. Now, the big thing here would be the door coaster. Now, we did learn that the door coaster will launch us up, or lift us off the ground in 4 seconds and launch us. So that's pretty crazy, and I believe it's 40 feet in the air. Now, not much else was said about this land, which kind of sucks, except for the fact that it is opening in 2027. We don't know when, but the door coaster itself will not open with the land, which I think is a very terrible idea. This kind of reminds me of Galaxy's Edge when they had opened, you know, half the land, or Avengers Campus when they will open up the land with one attraction and then you know the big e-ticket is on the way. However, this time around it's a little bit worse because you don't even have an attraction. You just have a show. I mean, I guess that is an attraction. You don't have a ride though. So I get it kind of if they have to open it just to, like, you know, filter people through the park, but I think it kind of sucks. I think they should just wait it out a little bit more until the door coaster is completed. Now, the last big announcement of the night, or I guess update, was Villains Land. Now, we already knew that there was going to be a dark, villain sort of land last time at D23. They didn't give us the name, and this time they just were like, what else were we going to call it? We're just going to call it Villains Land, which is fine. We're getting 2 massive e-ticket attractions that were showcased at the panel. One of which is an e-ticket Maleficent coaster, which I seriously hope is actually thrilling and pushes Disney to not make a kiddie coaster, but something on the level of I don't know, Velocicoaster or something that you would find at a Six Flags, because this is Villains Land. It's probably not going to be little Jimmy who's 5 years old walking in. It's probably going to be for more adventurous kids and more, I don't want to say adults, but teens, I guess, preteens, not little kids. So I think having a high level roller coaster that is actually extremely thrilling and pushes Disney to, engineer more daunting rides would be great here, especially if they can pull off the architecture, because this is, an outdoor coaster, and this is kind of relying heavily on the land's architecture. But I can already see that this is going to be probably an incredible coaster to ride at night, especially if they just pull off everything, because the next ride is an e-ticket boat ride, which has us riding along and seeing not every, but a lot of the villains in one spot. It looks like we're going to get Cruella de Vil, Dr. Facilier, Maleficent, and many others. I did appreciate that Cruella de Vil, Dr. Facilier, and the Evil Queen were the 3 sort of main villains, despite Maleficent's castle being a thing and being also a massive e-ticket. I love that Facilier is getting his own little thing. I think we're also getting some Scar in there, which would be cool. Many people are speculating that this will follow Shanghai Disneyland's Pirates dark ride format for their boat ride over here. And if that is the case, then that would be incredible, really incredible and just amazing. So I'm very excited about this land. I'm waiting for even more details. Of course, we didn't get an announcement of a release date for the land, but if I could guess, I would say 2030 or mid 2029. They have said that this land is the most ambitious thing that they have done to date, which I don't doubt them for a second on that. Even though something like Pandora or Galaxy's Edge was massive, this seems to be pretty ambitious. It's the same amount of acreage and scale as Galaxy's Edge. So, we're just updating the technology a little bit more, probably adding more intricacies and theming, and they probably learned some of the, right lessons from their mistakes with Galaxy's Edge and some other stuff. So I think that this is the biggest challenge that they got. So hopefully this thing can be pulled off well, but I don't think we're going to see it until 2030 or 2029. It's a little sad, but man, if they release it all at once, both rides, all the restaurants and gift shops all at once, like a true land should open, and it hits, then I think Disney will have a massive success on their hand, which really hasn't been the case for a couple of years, because Universal has been killing them in the game of virtually everything. Now, before we get to the final 2 announcements, I do want to point out that Abu Dhabi did get a very, very brief mention with 0 applause, none whatsoever, rightfully so, which this is really worth mentioning, because I don't think that Disney still realizes how many of the fans are upset about this thing. Maybe they do now, I don't know. They probably look at the social media, but this park is just a terrible idea. I haven't made another video since, they announced it, but even back then I was like, this is interesting technologically, but, concerning human rights violations with labor laws over there, and the fact that there's always wars going on, and the fact that also a missile almost hit Warner Brothers Park, I think this is an extremely stupid idea to build in Abu Dhabi. I really wish Disney would just pull out of the deal, go build in the UK or Canada or Mexico, literally anywhere else except for Abu Dhabi. It's such a terrible look for the company. It's really, really bad. So I'm actually happy that they didn't really focus on it too much and that nobody reacted positively to that. Now, another brief mention, which kind of had me sad, but I also kind of expected going in, was that Pandora will be coming to California Adventure, but that's all that we got. Now, I am happy that Pandora is still happening. I think that a completely new Avatar Land Pandora at California Adventure that isn't like the one in Animal Kingdom will be incredible. The models that I saw from the little, videos and photos of influencers that they had at the Horizons, pavilions and everything at D23 looked absolutely amazing. We got two incredibly huge announcements that were made but not expanded upon in any way, shape, or form. We got the greatest announcement that all of us parks fans have been waiting decades for, which is that Disneyland's Tomorrowland will be getting a full rework with new rides and attractions. Now, seemingly this is for Disneyland's 75th anniversary, which would be really cool. They just had their 70th. This year was 71. So if they could get it done, or at least like half of it done by 75, which is just 4 years from now, that would be incredible. I don't think they announced really any details whatsoever, just because I think it's one of those things that they're like, we've been blue skying this and thinking of ideas, but we don't have anything written down. I will be making a video going fully in depth about what I think will stay and what will go and what the big changes will be for this new Tomorrowland, but I am very happy about this announcement, and that this is supposed to be a look toward the future, a true look toward the future. And it seems like the aesthetic and the architecture will be very much like what Walt had envisioned all those years ago for Tomorrowland, and what Tomorrowland kind of originally looked like when it was opened way back when. The big final announcement that they threw out right after Tomorrowland was the fact that Dreamfinder and Figment shall return to Epcot. Yeah, Journey into Imagination is coming back to seemingly the original form, with a either completely original form or a slightly newer and updated form, just with, Figment and Dreamfinder yet again, which is incredible. I think that this announcement took me by an insane amount of surprise. I was already shocked by the Tomorrowland announcement and just so happy, just jumping for joy. And then this thing hits and I was like, there's no way they just announced this. I was shocked. And of course they abruptly ended it with no actual details or release date, because much like the new Tomorrowland, I'm thinking that they're probably just blue skying ideas. But I think that this is a good direction for Disney and Disney Imagineering, because this is stuff that doesn't really benefit investors, in my opinion. And I feel like sometimes Disney makes, or really honestly a lot of the time, Disney makes their decisions based off of their investors and not the fans. The new Tomorrowland could potentially benefit an investor, but it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time. And Dreamfinder and Figment doesn't really benefit your typical investor at the immediate moment, opposed to something like Galaxy's Edge. But I think both of these in the long run will just please Disney fans if they can actually, execute it. So that's my D23 recap. Overall, I had the expectation that this D23 would just be updates upon updates upon updates of what last year had announced. And it's nice that we got the Yeti, Disneyland Tomorrowland, Figment, and even, something like Earthrise, Space Mountain Earthrise, all great announcements, but they were all very brief, I guess except for Earthrise. But, I'm sure in 2028 at D23, we're going to have a lot more updates on all these things, and hopefully release dates on the lands that won't be completed by then. Because honestly, by 2028, I still think half of the things that they just gave us updates on won't even be finished, which kind of sucks. But hey, that's my thoughts on D23. However, there is one thing that I actually do want to just talk about a little bit more for D23, which is we didn't get any announcement or talk about Disneyland Forward. I think this is insane. Disneyland Forward has been going on as a project for a very long time and has been teased out for an extremely long time. The project needs to happen. We are so unclear about what's going on with it, if things are even approved. I think things are approved, but what is Disney trying to plan here? And the fact that there wasn't even a throwaway line about Disneyland Forward has me in a very not great, thought process about this. I don't think that it's going well. I hope it is, but I hope that Disney just didn't fully give up on this thing. Now, that will be all for today's video, friends. I do want to say, though, that on Sunday, you guys should be expecting a Country Bears movie review, you know, kind of like the one that we did for Mr. Toad's Wild Ride or The Wind in the Willows, that same type of format. And Wednesday, you guys can expect a smaller video where I actually do theorize about New Tomorrowland at Disneyland, because oh boy, I'm going to be making a lot of content on that for the next few years as we just get, you know, update after update or rumors, because this is something that I have been wanting for years upon years, much like a lot of other Disney fans. And I have a lot of different ideas on where this could go. And I just kind of want to, you know, dive into Tomorrowland as a whole eventually. So you're going to get a lot of Tomorrowland content on the channel.